My photography is gravitated towards trying to understand relationships between state power and its citizens, and how I, as a human being, can insert myself into the currents of history. This feeling had been brewing within me that the left had somehow failed the country in terms of not offering enough resistance to the Bush administration and the drumbeats marching us into extended, unjust wars. And so when I heard that there was this protest movement, I went down to Zuccotti Park, not quite knowing what to expect there, and not thinking that I would take pictures. I think the experience of being there and talking to people actually changed me and changed the way I started photographing. I would ask permission of everyone that I was photographing. I would collect their contact information, and I would email them a file of the portrait, but I would also make them prints. That kind of engagement, that kind of communication that was happening was almost more important than the actual photographs. The exchange of their ideas and my images were helping to crystallize this new social landscape that was developing. In the end, there are over 650 portraits in the project, and I didn't know when to stop. It was almost an addiction. The efficacy of public dissent to affect actual political change was incredibly inspiring to me. The lines between participant and witness were fairly blurry. I did participate in direct actions. I did march. I did spend 2 days in jail. So this is Shaima, who I met in Zuccotti Park, and she invited me to come to Tahrir Square to witness firsthand the revolution as it was unfolding there. When I first arrived in Cairo in early January 2013, things were actually pretty quiet. And then slowly things started getting tenser and tenser. This is all in the time leading up to the second anniversary of the January 25th revolution. As we were getting closer to that anniversary, more and more paroxysms of street violence were breaking out. What I was looking for were almost what I consider to be residues of resistance, forms that emerged from the actual political violence. There were ready-mades that I found on the street that were essentially discarded roadblocks or tire fires. When I first started meeting activists and protesters, I showed them photographs that I'd taken of the members of the Occupy movement. And in a way that opened up themselves to me. As I spent more time there, I was printing the portraits that I was taking, and I was showing them. The barriers to communication were pretty strong. I could convey so much about my impulses and what I was doing by just showing them photographs. For most of the time, I was just caught up in the moments and this strong desire to witness the events that were unfolding. Protesters would use the lasers to find each other in crowds, as much as they would use them to signal possible snipers on rooftops or plainclothes police in crowds. I saw them as a form of visual protest in themselves. as if the protesters did not want the state to determine what the revolution looked like. It was at times a harrowing experience to witness firsthand a state actively trying to kill its citizens. That for me, I don't know how to say this, without more emphasis, but that really blew my mind. And I just felt like I needed to bear witness to that. I've been accused of being an Israeli spy, a member of the CIA. I mean, people were just unsure of what my presence signaled. I was willfully naive to the level of danger that I was exposing myself to. There's something about standing next to someone who's photographing and they're wearing a helmet and you're just there in a hoodie that makes you wonder if you're doing the right thing. I think what photojournalists do is essential for our understanding of the world and also for the chance for a healthy democracy to exist. But I just don't consider myself to be working within that mode. I'm hoping to navigate between reportage, surrealism, and poetry to offer a different understanding of the complexity of the situation there. I think my goal is the same of a novelist. It's to refract my experience in the most compelling form possible. And so I take the liberties that an author might in order to reshape that world. I returned from Cairo with 23,000 images, and the process of distilling that into an edit and sequence took me over a year. I would go through within Photoshop and selectively parse through them, taking fragments of different negatives and seamlessly collaging them to make them conform to my ideas of what a given situation was and my outlook on the world. It's my first published book. I don't give a lot of context for the specific events that led to the pictures that I took. I wanted to immerse people in the atmosphere of the revolution, to echo my own sense of confusion on the ground. It's a little bit ambiguous, which is the front of the book and which is the back. If you read it as a Western audience would traditionally read a book, it starts with more oblique and atmospheric pictures that highlight the surrealism of the situation that I encountered. And they gradually build towards an increasing sense of threat and conflict. And then they end in a series of very stark portraits. If you go the other way, it goes from the portraits, these sort of more confrontational moments, and then it dissolves out to something that feels more atmospheric, as if the events on the ground were connected to larger forces in nature. My goal is not to educate people about specifically the events that happen. I'm not a historian, nor am I a journalist. I don't think images are inherently a good thing. Nor do I think they should replace arguments about political disputes. What I hope is that the images can engender a kind of emotional identification and can be a key instrument for encouraging some sort of political participation.